Welcome to Tea and Tarot with me, your host, Yashna. Each week I'll share what I've learned as I dive deeper into the world of tarot. I've got my cards in front of me, my cup of tea, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. This is Tea and Tarot.
Welcome back to Tea and Tarot. Today I am going to be jumping into the history of tarot and how it has come to be what it is in present day. And at the end, I will be doing a tarot reading. This is going to be my first real dive into the world of tarot and sharing out some of the information I learned as I've done a lot more research into this topic. Before jumping into this topic, I want to note that there's so much history and so many different stories about how tarot really originated and where some of the first inklings for it came from. And with each thing I read through and research more, I would find another topic that really fascinated me and end up jumping into that topic a lot more and going down a million different rabbit holes. So I've tried to really consolidate everything I've learned, and I'm going to do my best to share it in a readable manner. But without further ado, let's get into it. As I started to dive into tarot and I started to really play with my deck, one of the first questions I had was, how did tarot come to be what it is? And why do we use these cards for fortune-telling purposes? So I guess starting point, what is tarot and what is it perceived as today? It's often seen as witchcraft or something otherworldly, something intangible. Some believe that when you are reading the cards, you're actually opening or creating a gate to another dimension. So there's a lot of care that goes into practicing tarot, and there's a lot that you should be careful of, which I don't think is a bad warning. I'm not sure I fully believe that you're accessing another world. But it is interesting because the readings I've done for my friends so far do hold some level of truth where the cards that we read do feel connected to what we are experiencing in that moment and what we're asking the cards to tell us. And that is what it's more commonly used for. If you're walking on a beach strand or you're in a downtown area, you'll probably see a fortune-telling shop and they'll do palm readings or they'll do tarot readings. And that's really what it's used for. And that's how I've used it. Not necessarily as a means to predict the future, but more guidance and lessons to keep in mind as you're stepping into new journeys or trying to overcome certain obstacles in your life. So that's how it's currently perceived. And I became really curious about, where did the first tarot deck even come from? What is the first time someone used these cards to tell someone's fortune or help read their future? When did that happen? So there are some conflicting timelines, but generally the origin of tarot and the first real tarot-like decks perceived are similar. And for the sake of telling this, I'm actually going to jump into a different topic that I started researching halfway through this, but it's generally just playing cards. Where did cards come from? When did we start using them? And the earliest reference to these cards is from the 10th century in Chinese literature, but there's no physical evidence or markings of how they occurred, what they started for, and what their real purpose was. And then from there, the first playing cards that showed up in Europe was in the 1370s, probably in Italy or Spain, as imports or merchant possession from the Islamic Mamluk dynasty centered in Egypt, which is an important tidbit we'll come back to later. The first sets of cards were hand-painted, which really made them luxury goods. An account book of King Charles VI of France noted he paid 56 sols Parisians to Joachim Gringeneur for painting a deck of cards for his amusement. And that's largely how they were used. Early cards were seen as a luxury item because they were craftswork. They were made by artists with high prestige. So only nobility and royalty really had access to these. And this first deck that Jacquemin painted for King Charles was actually probably one of the first tarocchi decks made. Because it was really only seen as an item that nobility or royalty could use, it became a lot more popular in those circles, and a lot more families were trying to access hand-painted cards, including Duke Filippo Maria Visconti of Milan. Around 1450, the Visconti Sforza tarot deck was created, and 74 of those cards are still accessible today in museums and by historians to really compare it against tarot decks now. So it's the most complete historic deck of cards we really had. And this deck was called Carte da Trionfi, which means deck of cards including triumphs. In the current deck, the major arcana would be what were considered the trump cards in these original playsets. The Trionfi seem to really symbolize different figures and milestones within medieval reenactments of Roman triumphal processions. So a lot of the early decks and a lot of the symbols you would see would mimic different careers and different noble figures that people saw around them. For example, the Emperor card. And at this time, they were starting to experiment with adding in the Queen as another major figure for playing sets and for playing cards generally, because before that, it had traditionally just been 3 male figures instead. Woodblock printing became an option in the early 15th century and was used a lot more in the 16th to 17th century. And this reduced the cost of paintings and making these cards significantly. So these tarocchi decks were able to more commonly be used by others and became a lot more accessible than just by nobility and by royalty. And a lot of designs in the earlier decks were simplified for manufacturing, resulting in a lot of the common suits we see now in our playing decks, which are the spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. Some of the more unique decks that still portrayed characters were less accessible, but general playing cards became way more accessible at this time. In 1505 to 1530, around then, the cards began to be called tarocchi, which is where the current tarot word comes from. The first mentions of the word tarocco and tarocchi were found in 1505 as these cards grew in popularity. And a lot of people believe tarocchi, the word itself, came from the Taro River in northern Italy, since that is where this was really popular. One of the first tarocchi decks was the Mantegna tarocchi, which was another form of the cards, and these ones featured a lot of major characters that were grouped into 5 sequences of 10 cards, starting at the number 1 and going through 50. So every 10 cards played through another theme. One of those themes was a lot of the similar major arcana we see today, where it went through the different conditions of man, starting at beggar, going through servant, craftsman, merchant, gentleman, knight, doge, king, emperor, and then pope. A lot of the other sequences would symbolize characters from the arts. It would symbolize the Greek gods, the muses. So lots of symbolic figures in those earlier decks. Whew, my gosh, this is a lot of information. I totally understand if it is a lot to process. It is a lot for me to digest and then even figure out how to share out. But now I'm going to start digging into the actual tarot part of all of this. Tarot started as a card game similar to bridge, as I've mentioned, but evolved into something more in the 18th century. French author Antoine Court de Guesblen was credited as the first writer to introduce tarot cards to occultists. He was a Protestant pastor who grew up in Switzerland. He became a pastor there before he moved to France during the era of Enlightenment to help advocate for freedom of consciousness. He was initiated into the Freemasonry at the Lodge Les Amis Réunis. I'm so sorry if that pronunciation is so bad. But into that lodge in 1771, and then moved to the Lodge Les Neuf Soeurs, where he actually welcomed Benjamin Franklin as a lodge brother. Isn't that absolutely crazy? It does kind of check out timeline-wise because this is around when the American independence movement was happening, and France was a huge supporter of this movement. And Antoine in particular was a huge supporter of the American independence and was later elected an official honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1781. This has nothing to do with the tarot stuff, but it was just so fascinating to me and such a weird connection to find as I was digging into this. He gained a lot of regard for his literary skills, focusing more so on the origins of language and the theory of symbolism, and presented dictionaries of etymology, which is the study I was talking about of the origins of language and symbols. In relation to those studies, he spent a lot of time studying the tarot deck itself and trying to understand the origin of the symbolism in the cards and the meaning they held. At this point, tarot decks had been available for a couple hundred years, so a lot of different people had associated different meanings. A lot of the images had evolved by then. And as he was digging into the cards, he immediately thought the cards were linked to Egyptian secrets. Earlier, I mentioned that some of the playing cards may have actually been imported by merchants from Egypt, and that kind of ties into all of this. Now, Antoine didn't have any knowledge of how to decipher hieroglyphs, and he did a lot of his work without any real physical evidence, but he recreated the history of tarot, tracing the roots to Egyptian priests, and believed that they had put the meanings from the Book of Thoth into the card images, which would imply that the magic and divinity that came from the Book of Thoth was linked into these cards. Now, going on a small tangent, I had heard about the Book of Thoth before. I know it's linked to Egyptian mythology. I know it's linked to Thoth, who is the Egyptian god of wisdom. But I really wanted to understand more about why the cards being linked to that would suddenly mean they hold magic in them. So the Book of Thoth was a collection, or was believed to be a collection of ancient Egyptian texts written by Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing and knowledge. Some historians believe Thoth wrote over 36,000 books that were spread in temple libraries or hidden away in the god's own personal library. An ancient Egyptian short story told of a fictional Book of Thoth that contained a spell giving you the knowledge of how to actually reach the gods, and that book was hidden at the bottom of the Nile and guarded by serpents. When one of the princes, Neferkaptah, went to retrieve the book, his wife and son were killed as punishment from the gods. So when he died, he decided the book should die with him, and he kept it in his tomb. Later on, the protagonist of the short story, Setne, came to steal the book from the prince's grave, but was also punished with an illusion from the gods of him falling in love and then killing his wife and his children. That image haunted him so much that he returned the book and locked it away in the prince's tomb forever. Now, the short story is definitely a tangent in my research on the history of tarot, but generally it reflects that the knowledge that was stored in the Book of Thoth was not meant for humans to possess. It was secrets that the god Thoth had put into these books, but should never actually be shared with others. So the idea that any of the tarot cards could hold some of that magic and hold a god's knowledge really fed into the theory that it could be used for a divinity because it now held secrets of the future. It held secrets of life and what was happening around us. So this was a huge theory that Antoine was kind of the first to really put into words and then publicize in a book. In line and supporting this theory, he also linked the 22 trump cards, including the Fool now, to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and believed they were made as a way to communicate a secret language when they were brought to France in the 14th century. So he took all of these findings and published it, suggesting that you could really pull magic from the cards for cartomancy, which is fortune telling and divinity. And within 2 years, the fortune teller Attila had published a method to do so. For anyone still following along, and I know this has been a very long, rambly, I don't know what to say, word vomit about everything, but now we are at the point where tarot really becomes what it's known for today. Jean-Baptiste Alliot, pseudonym Attila, was a French occultist and tarot researcher. He was originally a seed merchant and also worked as a teacher and an author. In 1770, one of his first works was a book on the stories within regular playing cards, including an additional Attila card. He assigned meanings to each card in its regular and its reversed position, and that learning and telling is still widely used in tarot today. He noted that some of this was learned by an Italian he played cards with, so it's unsure how much of his readings into the cards were really his own thoughts versus thoughts and meanings he pulled from others. After Antoine Court de Gebelin released his work on the meaning of tarot, Attila then also shared his own interpretation on how to actually read the cards. He made the first book about reading tarot cards called How to Entertain Yourself with the Deck of Cards Called Tarot. In his work, Attila claimed he'd been introduced to cartomancy 30 years prior, but this was a bigger focus on the tarot cards specifically. He created a group to dive into the cards further and then published a deck specifically for divination purposes that incorporated older forms of cartomancy in France. This was the first deck ever released purely for divinity and occult purposes. In 1790, he founded the Nouvelle École de Magie, i.e. the New School of Magic, and then published another paper diving further into the Book of Thoth and added reworkings of the cards. He helped introduce the 4 elements and astrology into the cards and what would become known as the major versus minor arcana. Using that more as a starting point, occultists then started giving each card deeper meaning, adding notes for when the card was upright, upside down, and themes between the different cards. It's worth noting it wasn't hard to really link the cards to divinity, especially with the detailed illustrations and meanings from the trump cards already within each deck. Today, one of the most popular versions of the tarot deck is the Rider-Waite deck, which was created by Pamela Coleman Smith and A.E. Waite and was first sold in 1910. I will be doing another episode digging more into some of the different popular decks used and some of the different meanings, especially comparing the Rider-Waite deck, which was the first deck I was ever gifted, and then also the Light Seers deck, which is the one I practice with regularly. So that's kind of a breakdown of the chronological history of the origins of tarot. While most agree it originated in Europe, as noted, there are theories suggesting the connection between tarot symbolism and the Book of Thoth, which would suggest that these really originated in Egypt instead. Some suggest these were actually created by traveling gypsies, so they may have originated from Egypt or taken a lot of learnings, but were more created in a nomadic purpose rather than rooted in Egypt. They could have also come from India too, due to some Sanskrit findings and links to the cards. Some who link it back to India note the game Ganjifa, which has 10 suits, each with 12 cards. Some of the themes I'll talk about later around symbolism were largely attributed to the Egyptian cards, but there is some speculation it was inspired by the Hindu gods instead, or drew from both cultures, which would really support the theory that these cards came from gypsies who could have collected lots of different stories from different cultures as they were traveling. Another theory on some of the original images on the cards is that the Knights Templar had access to mystical knowledge that they wanted to protect against the Christians around the Crusades period. Some believe they had access to subject matters including the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. The Kabbalah is a collection of Hebrew teachings that describe basic truths of the universe, including info on the Tree of Life and how it relates to cosmic lift and how heaven and earth fit together. So in order to protect that knowledge and protect the truths that they learned about from the Kabbalah, they decided to only share those stories through figures so that it would remain a secret language amongst those knights. And that might have inspired a lot of the imagery that we see in a lot of the older tarot decks. And that's pretty much a wrap on my dive into the history of tarot and how it has come to be what it is today. I know that was a lot of information to digest, but I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. I'm going to take a little bit of a break and switch over to doing a reading for one of my friends now. It's really just a lot of us giggling and having so much fun together, but it was so much fun to do a reading for a friend and actually record it for this podcast. So stay tuned because we'll be right back for that. Hello, I am here with This is so funny. It's my first guest star, my old high school friend Paulina, who will be joining me as I do a tarot reading for her.
Hello. Hi, guys.
You have to speak pretty close to the microphone.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you.
This is so weird.
Hi, Yashna's fans.
I only have one microphone, so if the audio comes in a little weird, that's why. I'm gonna apologize in advance. This is also the first time I'm trying to record us doing a reading, so this will be super interesting, and we're gonna see how it goes.
Let's do it.
So, before we begin, is there anything specific you want to think about as we do your reading?
Not really. Just let's see what I get from these tarot cards and go from there.
Well, you gotta think about something, like a theme. And for context for people, as we've noted, I'm very beginner at tarot readings, so we're just gonna do kind of like a simple 3-card spread.
Okay.
Of, like, the first one will be kind of what you want or present state. The second card will be an obstacle in the way, and then the third is path towards what you want or what that hope is. So it's a pretty simple 3-card spread. It's usually recommended for beginners doing any readings. So think of a theme or something. Usually it helps if it's like, for example, it could just be what's going on with my love life or career or anything like that.
Can you both of them? I want to give 2 good examples because they're both in shambles. They're both. Oh, okay. Let's do. Wait.
Covering the microphone doesn't do anything. It still picks up the audio.
Okay, just cut this out. Future Yashna, cut this out. So I should should choose one theme. Can you do 2 readings? Do one for like career and maybe another one for love life. Let's just see.
Yeah, you know what? Let's do 2 readings.
drama,
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that. Okay. So, on the camera right now, if you're watching the video for this, you can see the deck. And then, please note, I will be cheating a little bit as I do the reading. Once the cards are pulled, I will definitely be reading the manual a bit to like refresh on the cards.
That's fine. I keep forgetting to come up here. Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, if I had a second microphone, this would be a little easier. But I was like, let's just see how this goes.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
The cards are really pretty. She's shuffling them right now. I'm just gonna I'll narrate what you're doing as your guest. She's shuffling them, giving them a good shuffle. Okay, and now what's she up to? She's like, oh, she placed them down again. I don't know how to be helpful. I'm just sitting here.
Okay. I was just shuffling them to just reset the cards from the last time they were read. And now, Paulina, I'm going to have you shuffle the cards until you feel good about it. And while you're shuffling, think about the theme. Like, you don't have to do like any fancy shuffling or anything. Just shuffle the deck until it feels good. But the whole time you're shuffling it, think about the theme that you want to keep in mind this time around, which I think we're doing career first.
Yeah.
Let's do career first. Yeah, career. Okay. So, yeah, just shuffle the deck. Well, hold them in your hands as you're shuffling that. It's just more to kind of like imbue your thoughts and what you're trying to get out of it. Okay. And now, I'm going to hold the deck for you, and then I want you to split it 3 ways. Okay. So, just in this final state it ended up, just break it.
And put it here?
Yeah, just put it there. That's fine. And then this is the third. Okay, small shuffling around of the cards to put them in frame and center them, but we are going to pull all of the different cards for the reading. So the first one is kind of current state / goals, which is the Ace of Wands. Second card, which usually represents an obstacle, is 9 of Swords. And then the third card, which is more thoughts on what to keep in mind to get to where you want, is the Hierophant. So, cool. I know some of these, I don't know all of them, so we're going to take a quick 2-second pause while I...
You're good.
while I read the little booklet, so we'll be back in just a moment. We're back. I've done a little bit more digging into the different cards and their meanings. So now I'm going to share out some of what it means, and then we'll see how it resonates and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So...
I was like, sounds good.
This entire segment is just gonna be us laughing, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, so the first card that got drawn was the Ace of Wands. This card, as the first one, is supposed to be representative of kind of like what your goal is, like what you're hoping for. And the Ace of Wands is symbolic of new opportunities, new growth, especially with the themes of creativity and inspiration. So it's kind of paving this new path and really taking in new teachings, new learnings, new concepts, like trying to pave something entirely new for yourself, and is kind of representative of untapped potential. So, especially as we're talking about career stuff, I think that's pretty representative of figuring out like what's next, like what's new, like
Exactly.
looking at it more with creativity and like new potential for that. And then the second card drawn is the Nine of Swords. The second card generally is representative of obstacles, fears, something holding you back, or a major lesson to keep in mind. So, especially around this with career stuff, the Nine of Swords is more representative of like your biggest fears and anxieties, what keeps you up at night. And it can be things from the past that might be holding you back moving forward. So, just knowing what I kind of know about you and your career path till now, I feel like that fits pretty well, but I'll let you speak to that as much as you want. And then oh, that's so formal sounding. The third card drawn is the Hierophant, which as the third card is supposed to be more representative of what is something to do or something to keep in mind that'll help you achieve your goals and really hit the outcome you desire. So the Hierophant is representative of kind of a guru and new learnings, new teachings. Generally, it's more around spiritual learnings and kind of figuring out your faith and what grounds you, but is also just generally like, who are the gurus in your life? Where have you learned things? What teachings can you take in? And then the other thing that's really interesting with this is the Hierophant is a major arcana. So usually that is representative of major milestones and major shifts in your life. So especially as that has to do with teachings and learnings and discovering yourself a bit more, it could mean that you are going to need to figure out what this major shift in your life is going to look like and really taking in those new teachings for this milestone. Yeah, that's the reading.
Yeah, I felt like that was very accurate. So good job. Props to Yashna for her first reading. Yeah, starting with the Ace of Wands. I got laid off a couple months ago, so I feel like now's the time to kind of reflect and look forward to see what I actually want to do and kind of my career path going forward. So very accurate for that first card. Second one, super accurate because I feel like I wasn't in the healthiest of workplaces in the past. So I feel like I still have a lot of that stress and anxiety that I still take from those jobs. So now I'm like trying to learn how to kind of break that pattern I was in before and looking forward, find something that's like healthier and more balancing for me. And then the last card I also agree with because over the summer especially, I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I want, I guess, the rest of my life to kind of look like. Or moving forward, my future goals. Cut that part out. My so future, yeah. Like just reflecting on the future and what I want. Because I feel like the previous jobs I've had, I kind of just like took them because they were presented to me and I didn't really like seek them out of my own, like, what's the word? Like my own, not free will, but I did seek them out of my own free will. Ooh, what a good word. Yeah, I didn't seek them out of my own volition. Yeah. And I want to find something that's more aligning to who I am and like the lifestyle I want to have. So, yeah, the three of them, very good first reading. I 100% resonate. So, props to Yashna. Great job. She killed it.
Thank you. And thanks for letting me do a reading for you and being the first person I'm doing this with for my podcast. Yeah, this was super fun. I love doing readings for people. I love, especially with my friends, because I do know some backstory and context, which I think is always helpful for doing a more accurate reading. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me today, Paulina. And tune in next week for maybe another reading with said friend. We'll see. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you have any additional info you want to share with me, or have any questions or notes, or just want to say hi and let me know you're actually listening, I would love that. And you can reach out to me on my Instagram account or email me at teatimepodcasts123@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to Tea and Tarot with Yashna. This episode was produced, hosted, and edited by me, Yashna Bunsel, and brought to you by Tea Time Podcasts. Special thanks to my friend Paulina for joining me for a tarot reading today. The tarot reading was done using the Lightseers deck by Chris Ann, and all card visuals are from the Lightseers deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. Music was made using SoundRaw. Research was done using Wikipedia, Britannica, and the Ultimate Guide to Tarot by Liz Dean, and many, many Google searches. Join me next week for another episode of Tea and Tarot.